Okay, you're on, folks. We're being recorded. I did remember this time. So first of all, welcome to the latest first Sunday of the month. We've had I think around about 15. I think it's quite amazing. It's about a year and a quarter we've been doing this. We've been covering so many. Oh, hi there. Hi there, Paul. Good to see you.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of topics, and there's been one. So first of all, I think I've seen all of you here before, which is quite unusual. Which is very nice. Which means you come back. You're gluttons for punishment. You come back for more. Um, what the theme? I think. I mean, I know through all these meetings is that from my point of view, well, it has to be because of what I'm going to say now, that all disciplines, whether science and cosmology or physics or philosophy or art, geography, geology, whatever it is, um, are all about us. What I mean to say is they are stories about what we see or think about, imagine and discover. And they can only be stories that we tell and others tell us. Basically, that what we're looking at, we cannot look at anything but things that we participate in. And that's a very important point. Not everybody, in fact, most people don't agree with that, but I will go into it and you'll see what I mean. Um, Basically, when we look at the outside world, we're actually looking at ourselves, not in a spiritual sense, because I'm not very big on spiritual stuff, but um, it's a journey inwards. My personal journey, which in the books that I wrote are that go from nothing all the way to the greatest something, which is time. And this journey that I'm taking um, has taken me to places I didn't expect to go, but I had to go there. It went from philosophy and linguistics to physics and quantum mechanics and cosmology and to all sorts of subjects I thought I'd never touch, but I had to because philosophy is connected with all these topics and they have to be connected because those are the things that make us tick. Hume, let me give you a quote. He happens to agree with me. Uh, Let us chase our imagination to the heavens or to the utmost limits of the universe. We never really advance a step beyond ourselves. Um, if we just one more quote from Heisenberg, who said that remember that what we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. In other words, outside of ourselves, there isn't anything. There can't be. Okay, so today we're talking about limits, and limits are everywhere. And when I started to look at this the topic, I, I began to see that limits runs through everything that I've been looking at. There is a love-hate relationship that we have with limits. We act as though there are limits. That makes us safe. It's a good feeling to have limits. Um, the but also we act as though there are no limits because we think that we can, as the saying goes, go outside the box and we can go beyond limits. I'm going to show today that actually we can't, and that we are stuck in in the limits that we create. In fact, we create our own limits, our own bubbles. On social media, we can actually block people that we don't like. So we are basically left with people who agree with everything we say and vice versa. And that makes us really safe because everybody's sort of agreeing with us and we think that that's our world, which it isn't. There are other bubbles, but that's the bubble that sort of interests us. Kierkegaard said that he noticed an anxiousness, a tremendous anxiousness that that is with absolute freedom. Absolute freedom was pure hell. He called it he called it the nervous system, the anxiousness and its fear and trembling. Those are the words he used. The point that you can do anything is extremely frightening. Okay, with no limits, we can see another Danish bloke, Edward Munch's The Scream. If you know the picture, it is a horrific picture of a great scream of existential angst that somebody realizes that out there is possibly nothing, but he has to deal with it. And there is nowadays it's something called avoidant personality disorder. So it is so intense to be alone, that with the borders of one's own self, that these people can hardly find words to describe the horror of being completely alone. They want to connect with other people and just can't. That's avoidant personality disorder. Then there's something very, very interesting that we think when we look at celebrities, etc., and they've got everything, and people with lots of money and billions and everything is great, and yet it isn't. It's called high functioning anxiety, apparently. People who ostensibly have everything come face to face with the opposite, that really the fact that they've got everything makes them feel even worse, that outside they realize there's actually nothing there apart from their own personality, and they feel that it's a sort of bluff. So I can link this to Socrates. So he said to truly know that we don't know is to be comfortable with our ignorance while pushing against its boundaries, and to temper our desire for wholeness with an authentic understanding of our limitations. But he was Greek, and it's a long time ago, and he reckoned that that's very comfortable to not know anything. I'm not sure that nowadays we would admit that we don't know anything and feel very, very happy about it. But that's those are the old Greeks. My summing up is that knowledge is subjective certainty. Subjective certainty. Okay, so there is a basic. By the way, I didn't mention the beginning, but you all know that I'm not actually giving a lecture. I'm putting points forward, and at one point, when I get fed up, I'm going to stop, and then you can argue with me or might even agree with me, although that's quite unusual. Anyway, there is there seems to be a basic human internal conflict between limits and the urge for non-limits. We constantly place ourselves within limits and then try to break out. So we'll learn a craft, or we'll learn a musical instrument. We want to break out of the things that we feel comfortable with. But this is a constant conflict. What there is and what there isn't. So we struggle and fight against limits, even as we stay safe within them. It's like walking across a narrow bridge, which we can do if there's a rope or a border or even a piece of string on either side, we can walk along that quite happily. But if there isn't, we are very, very, very worried about it. And anyway, the end is safe. I don't remember when they stopped at the end of films putting on the end. Do you remember films had the end? Just in case you don't know. When I lived in England, we had God Save the Queen, so we all knew that was the end anyway. But that's a different story. That's where the tortoises come in, by the way. Anyway, the end, it said the end. And sometimes it had fin, which is fin, but since we were in England, we called it fin. As far as we're concerned, films ended when it had fin at the end. But films never end, because they end, for example, walking into the sunset after 1.5 hours of people struggling, man and woman, and it was then men and women who walk into the sunset, and it's the end. But we all know that's not the end. It's the end. We all feel good about it, but it's the end of the film, and it is the end in a context. But it is not an end. The adage, it all works out in the end, doesn't mean much, by the way, because we never know when the definitive end is. In fact, we only know when it was. We can only know after it's ended that there was an end. Before, there's never an end. There's going to be an end, and when it happens, it's gone. So we actually miss the end. We miss the fin. So, but to say there are limits would seem to indicate that we are limited. But are we? Just as we cannot imagine not imagining, we cannot imagine an infinite imagination. Now, I say that limits, certainty, are not fundamental. They're not. They don't exist. They are the limits of some things. And those there are some things, the limits are fuzzy. Okay. Now, if we look at an object, any object, we can say, well, there's a limit. There's a surface to it. It's the end of it. But I define objects as spaces that separate them and exist because of time that combines them. Now, they're all part of a continuum, because if you focus on any object, eventually the edges will be fuzzy, and so that the object actually melds into the space around it. And that will happen with any object. You just have to go in close enough, and you'll see the fuzziness. So all is part of a continuum. All right. It is what physicist Lee Smolin would, I suppose, call causation, to show that time is the basis and space is emergent from time. Now, there is a problem here. If time is the basis and everything emerges from it, how can there be time without an observer? Who is the time for? That is a question you can think about. We're gonna get back to that. So what I've shown so far, it is difficult to identify limits. They are continuums, but limits themselves are necessarily exact. A limit has to be exact. Now we're asking, is there such a thing as exactness? Okay, so all relationships of whatever sort must be unlimited. Has to be. A relationship has to be unlimited, I think. How can a relationship be limited? So causation cannot be limited. One thing leads on to another. If they were limited, it couldn't lead on to anything. Okay, Morris, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do.
Why?
Well, a few things. First of all,
wait, Maurice, wait, wait.
hang on.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Hang on.
I've written a few notes, and I just wanted to.
Can you can you can you do me a favor? Otherwise, it's going to be chaos here, as it used to be. Now, hang on. Do me a favor. Take your hand down. You'll be the first.
I'm gonna hang on.
I promise you, you'll be the first. Take your blue hand down. I've got to get through a few things. I might even get to what you want to ask me. Hang on, all right? There are only a few of us today, so I can be as rude as I want. I usually am anyway. So, okay. An approximate limit is not a limit. Anything that's approximate cannot be a limit. It's not static. And such a limit would be objective. And you know what I think of objectivity, right? So limits are arbitrary. Look at the arts. When did modernism become postmodernism? How? Where's the line? Or physics, classical physics and particle physics, they somehow one moves into the other, and everybody wants to know where exactly does it happen. And the particle physics is, a lot of it is philosophy of those who know who were with me before, or physics and mathematics. Some people say, I'm a mathematician, I'm not a physicist. Or I'm a physicist and not a mathematician, but you can't be a physicist without being a mathematician, by the way. Languages are very, very much fuzzy, especially in the same language family. And borders, national borders, blur them even more. As you know, the closer you get to a border, the closer that language is to the one on the other side of the border, until you can't really tell the difference in one another. And the border is a political border. And history, Frank, when the Middle Ages, when they become the Renaissance, and when the Renaissance was the Enlightenment, there's no cutting off point. There's no point you can say that was that and that's that. They merge into each other. So something very, very interesting. I will stop soon. Don't worry. I've got lots more, but anyway, something very, very interesting, that language tries to get us to limits. And I noticed very strangely that the word very does the exact opposite. You would think that very makes it more limited, actually makes it less. The dictionary says wrongly, says actual, precise, used to emphasize the exact identity of a particular personal thing. But that's not true. If you think of the words an exact measurement, and then you go to versus a very exact measurement, which one is more? A very exact measurement somehow shows that you're not there yet. And what about a precise meaning versus a very precise meaning? Okay, very seems to denote that there are degrees. So you're adding something, but you're actually giving it degrees. So the closer we get to anything, the more we see of less. You get closer and closer and closer, and you see lots of less. All right. The further out we move, the less we see of more, until, as I say, we get so far that what we're examining disappears. Let me just mention science for a second, where science tries to get to limits. The Planck length is approximately 1.6 multiplied by 10 minus 35 meters, which is believed by physicists to be the shortest possible length in the universe. But we can use the known laws of quantum mechanics and the known behavior of gravity to determine a position to a precision smaller than the Planck length. That's very, very theoretical. We haven't got a limit even there. And have we got to the lowest turtle yet? I'm not sure, because the position that's being measured in quantum mechanics, you get to a point. That is the point that we say, well, there it is. There is the particle. And no, a point is something that only we can imagine. There is no point. There can't be a point. And as Terry pointed out to me, to get to a point, you need such enormous energy that the whole thing is absolutely, there cannot be a point. So, but we can only do it because our imagination doesn't go any further and say, there's that point. So if that's the lowest turtle, we haven't really got to it because we can't see it. You need too many turtles to make a tortoise, or the other way around. So what I want to just say, that nothing begins and nothing ends. Only arbitrary beginning and ends. Even nothingness is unlimited. Where there is time, and there's time everywhere, there are no limits. Time does not end for us, and neither does it begin. Let me explain those who are puzzled by that, apart from Morris, who's not puzzled by that. For us, time does not end, never. When it ends, we don't know about it. And when we were born, we don't know about that either. Time never ends for us. We are eternal. We live forever. Because when we stop, we just won't know. Ta-da! So, thought you'd like that. So, and another thing to astound those who didn't read the time book, there is no now. Now, now seems quite a thing that you're in, but there isn't. It's just too short. The second we're there, it's gone. It moves back to the past, and it's continuously moving back to the past, and the past and future is based on what we remember in the past. And since our past is a memory which is very dubious anyway, we can understand that imagining what's going to happen in the future is a pretty rough thing to do. In fact, we can't predict anything ever, because we only know if we have predicted it when we get to it. So we are all stranded in the past that paradoxically has no limits. The present, in which we are so frequently advised to live, is fleeting and actually non-existent. Our pasts are richer, aren't they? More filled with lessons and associations and meaning. We should spend more time there. In fact, we do. So let me just talk about one more thing before Morris does his thing, because he's very nervous there, and I can't stand it. I can't take it. You're jumping up and down. I just talk about nostalgia for a second, which is memory, is a semi-false memory, and therefore has limits or has no limits. The poetry anthologies of any great literary tradition are not filled, as you would expect, with love affairs, but with laments for lost time. The first great lyric poem in English, actually Anglo-Saxon, The Wanderer, mourns the mailed warriors, mead halls and bright goblets that have vanished into the past as if they never were. As one gets older, folks, memories have ever more fuzzy edges. And so the fuzzy edges, now I will move. Oh, hello, Sally. I didn't see you come in. Hi, good to see you. And now, Morris, you may stop jumping up and down and go for it.
Well, I think I've forgotten what I wanted to say.
That's what I was hoping.
No, but I've made copious notes.
Oh, fast.
First of all, if we all agree with you, can we say that that's the limit and we finished for tonight?
You will never all agree with me. You can't agree with me.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought I'd try. But I have a problem with this thing about the limits being subjective, because you don't like objective. And of course, the death being the limiting factor, birth, death, the limiting factors of our lives. The limits are set for us from the beginning by our very mortality, by our very, very being. And everything that we see in the world, we see through the eyes of one who realizes he is mortal. That's a very, very strict limit. And it's a limit which is with us all the time, whether we choose to acknowledge it or ignore it. You know, you talked about a film having the end, and it's not really the end, because, well, we get up from our seats and go home, and the actors all went home afterwards, and nobody died. But in the film is a portrayal of life, but with one very big lie. It makes it into what it is. The lie being that nothing is real in it, and nobody actually dies at the end. Hang on.
I'm going to forget all this.
Right.
My memory's fuzzy.
Right. The idea of history. You said before you mentioned to Frank, history, the Middle Ages and Renaissance and all that. I can't really imagine anybody sort of getting up one morning, looking out and saying, looks like the end of the Middle Ages. It's probably Renaissance tomorrow. Because those are things that we, looking at all that, have imposed on it, or we have categorized certain things in that way. It all comes out of who we are. Right at the beginning, when you said philosophy is all about us, and so is this. It's no less about us than anything else. I think I'll have another drink.
Good idea. Everything you said is correct, because it's everything that I've said, but you put it in different words. When you are right that our being alive is a part of knowing that we won't be here. That's Sartre, etc. It's an anxious knowing it's going to happen. The point is, we don't know. We only know about other people. When somebody dies, by the way, on films, people do die. Actors, for us, die. But they
get
don't.
Up again.
Yeah, well, we don't see that. Only in operas do they get up again.
Sometimes you can see them breathing.
True. But the point I made was that even though we know this in inverted commas, we also know that we are eternal, because we will never know that we've ended. We just won't know it. We know it in theory. We can all talk about it. And we know that other people die, and we can see that other people have died, but it had nothing to do with us. It's always somebody else. Somebody else is always in that accident. Somebody else is always ill, and somebody else always dies. But it's never us. It's never a point when somebody comes to Zoom and said, "I'm dead." It won't happen. What was it? What was the other point you made? The first one, I've forgotten. Can't hear you.
There were so many, it's hard to remember.
No, but you're right that we that's what I said in the beginning. We impose ourselves on what is around us. Some of you I know personally, and I know what you're like from what I can see, and I can never know really what you are, what you really are, what you really feel. I can't. I can only know what you feel according to what I know I would feel it if I was in your in your position. We can never feel anybody else's pain. If our child is in pain and we feel terrible, but that the actual pain we don't feel, however close we are, we can't. That's the limit. We are limited in ourselves, and which is quite frightening because we can't get near anybody. We just can't. We can get very, very, very close, but not really. And that could be quite frightening, I think.
I just want to strengthen one of your points, and that is our need for limit, for limitation. And it seems to me very clear that as human beings, we find all sorts of reasons to limit ourselves, whether it's because of political correctness, or it's because of democratic practices, or it's because of religious strictures telling us what we can eat and can't eat. We bring on ourselves limitations and feel more comfort through that. But that's only because we need to be reminded it's a constant theme in our lives that we are mortal.
Okay. First Augustine and then Frank. Frank, you have a little blue hand down there. Can you press it? 1 minute. I'm going to Augustine and then to you, Frank. All right. Augustine.
Hi.
Yeah, Augustine.
Yes, thank you. So wonderful. All these dropping of ideas. I loved it. I had a point. Thinking about time. That I was actually for not very used to me to go against what you say, Ron. But I want to leave it. I want to leave it on the side. Maybe I'll come back later because I like how I like how Maurice ended with the idea. He said that he was thinking that he was reinforcing your point of view, saying that humans have a need for limits. But from my notes, what I've got written here from Rome is that actually humanity has a urge to push the limits. And I find that deeply contradictory. Do we have a need for certainty and limits, or do we have a need to overcome them? I think both needs are contradictory. And I could accept we are contradictory beings. I could accept that easily, very easily, and just leave it there. But I think really what we have is, as Marie said, needs for limits. We need certainty. We know how ethereal are really political borders, and then we think we need them anyway to distinguish who belongs to which country. It's something that we need, and we are concerned of how many issues that's make, and how many humans are not recognized with dignity because of the border issues. But still, we have the problem because we need the limit. My point will be with Maurice in this time. I think we need the limits. A possibility could be that we need the limits in order to overcome them, but that would be thinking on my own. That was my point.
No, I agree with you 100% that there is an internal fight between limits that we need and the non-limits that we're pushing against. And I think that's always within us. The point of when we talk about going out of the box, I mean, you can't go out of your box as far as I'm concerned, but we want to, and we're pushing. And at the same time, we need the limits, and that part of that makes us, I think, what we are as humans. We can't see beyond the limits, although we want to. We want to get out there. I agree with you, Augustine. Frank, yes.
I think human beings need the idea, the concept of limitless, because, I mean, we've got the expression, the sky is the limit, meaning that it gives us the motivation and the ambition to progress and to do better things or to advance. That's one thing I wanted to say. Another thing I wanted to answer Morris when he said he doesn't believe that somebody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, it's the end of the Middle Ages and now it's the Renaissance. He's absolutely right. But the whole idea of historical limits, periods of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance came about in the 19th century. It didn't exist in the Middle Ages or in the time of the Renaissance. These are terms and words and concepts and periods which were adapted much later, hundreds of years later, in order to give clarity. These periodic limits were there for the ideas of giving clarity for so much information and the history through the ages. Now, this goes back to the early Greeks. The early Greeks knew everything, of course, as we know. They were the cleverest of all. And they understood the idea of limits and the idea of limits in history. And therefore, their concept of history wasn't that it's linear, that we go up and then it's the end or it's infinite, but they had cyclic ideas of history. It was a kind of parabola. In other words, empires went up, empires went down, empires arose and empires collapsed, and different empires came about, and so history went on and never went up in a linear progressive idea. Ideas of limits and linear ideas came up much later in the time of the Enlightenment in the 18th century. And of course, that's been disbanded ever since. But I mean, the whole idea is purely man-made to give clarity, to give understanding, to help us along in everyday life. So I see it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. We impose limits on things that people at the time didn't think that there's a limit to what we're doing now. Afterwards, we said there's a limit. We need them.
Yeah.
We need them. We need limits.
Yeah.
We need to impose limits all the time. We need to. That's a very interesting point. I'm coming to you in a minute, Ron, but ladies first in this particular case. Debbie.
Thank you. Thanks, Ron, and Ron for getting first in line here. All the discussions here about the limits and the human in the limitation reminds me of Kant. I mean, if we talk about the limitations of reason, the limitations of human mind, this is something that Kant, it is the basis of Kant's philosophy. And if we talk, I'm going to start with, I mean, Kant came with, maybe we could say, with trying to referee between two domains of empiricism and rationalist. And Frank mentioned the 18th century. So Kant was perhaps the first one to try and reconcile between two different thoughts that try to explain the world around us, but in different ways. If you have the empiricists that we can understand and grasp the world only by experience, or only by the mind, like with the rationalists, only by reason. And they both tried to see how we can bridge the human mind with the external world, with the physical world. What is the mediation between us and the external world? If there's an external world that exists independent of our consciousness or our mind or our reason, how can we actually know it? And Kant actually said, and that's his reconciliation with empiricism and rationalism. I'm not sure, Ron, you would agree with his solution, is that pure reason, that is what he, I mean, that's in his book, and the critique of pure reason, is that reason and our minds is what shapes the physical world. I mean, the way that we can grasp the physical world is through the human mind, through reason, which means that the physical world actually depends on our consciousness, our mind. We have, he calls it the categories or innate ideas, like cause and effect, numbers, the way we see, or consistency, the way we grasp the world. This is what we, the reason, implements on the world. The world is actually depends on how we, the human mind, grasps it. We cannot, that is the limitation. There is, I mean, Kant did assume that there is a physical world that is independent, or that human mind does not create the physical world. And that's not that there is nothing out there, but the way that we see causal relationship, or the way that if I see the physical world and the human mind makes order. So causality is not something that is in the physical world itself, it is in the human mind. And he's got two parts in the way that's the critique on the pure reason. That pure reason, that is also the way that he bridges between the empirical world and reason. For Kant, there cannot be perception, or cannot be a causal relationship, or math, or geometry, or time and space without empirical experience. So this is the bridge. For Kant, you cannot grasp the world without the empiricist experience, the senses. And for him, that was part of his critique, to show how grand the pure reason is, how time and space are human categories. Okay, this is not something that is out there in the empirical world. This is something that is part of reason. And on the other hand, and that is the second part of the critique, is that that reason is limited. It is very limited to the empirical world, which means we can get to true conclusions about the world only through the experienced world. That is why he was he said, like religion, he was aware that reason it has this inclination to get beyond itself, the transcendental, but it cannot do that. And that would be for him transcendental, metaphysical, dreams, illusions. It has to be empirical, and the connections, that when he tries to bridge that by saying that the scientists are the ones who actually deal with the connections of what reason can do. With scientists deal with cause and effect, with inertia, with gravity. I mean, that is the part of reason that can carry on exploring, but it cannot explore beyond itself. It is like, I think there's the metaphor of our consciousness as with spectacles, with glasses. Okay, this is our reason. This is the way that we perceive, as if we've got pink or red glasses, innate glasses, which we cannot take off. And this is, but you need the thing in itself. There is a world, an object in itself, but we cannot know what it is. Our reason makes order of what it is. We cannot go beyond that limit of the pure reason of reason. So that is the limits with Kant. That, but I think you say, Ron, that there is nothing outside of us. So Kant says we need that thing outside of us. That we need that there cannot be. He's not a solipsist like Descartes, who said. And also that's what's so special about Kant, that until him, if again we go to a limit, philosophers needed God to be the mediator between us and the external world and our truth and knowledge. How can we really know if it's Descartes? There's God to give us the validity that what we know is actually true. And Kant, he was the first and who did not need God. He just needed pure reason with the empirical experience. But he could talk, he did talk about God, but it is not a truthful conclusion.
Yeah.
It is metaphysical.
And Kant, of course, had a way out by saying that that the thing in itself is over there, that we can never see it. It's a very nice way of saying I don't know. There's something
Yeah,
out
this is
there.
outside of pure reason, and we cannot, we can never attend to it. That's why he was also against spiritual things and of course against the Greek mythology or the soul, or for him that would be not truth, not a truth. That would be the inclination of reason to want to break the limits. That is, he would call the fall, the downfall of reason. That we always want to extend the limitation. That is perhaps in a psychological need to break the laws, to extend, to get out of our comfort zone, or to break limits. But metaphysically, for Kant, this is not possible.
Yeah.
Only something that has a connection to empirical experience. So he needs the thing in itself. He needs the world. It cannot be something that just comes from oneself.
Yeah. Thank you. Very interesting. Very good. Thank you. Ron.
Yes, so first of all, very quickly, I'd like to apologize to Debbie because she said a lot of fantastic stuff, and I had prepared a few comments, and so I'm not going to respond at all to Debbie, and I just, it's just the way this stuff works. I'll probably say, if I have 3 brief points I want to make, and I'm sure nobody will respond to them because they're already preparing theirs, so this is the way it works. But here are my 3 brief points. I'll be as brief as I can. Point number 1, Ron, I think, at least in part, you are more spiritual than you realize. You know, if you could drop the labels for a while, I think that you would, you know, there are streams of thought in you that are very spiritual. And I'll leave that point there, okay?
No, don't.
So I'm going to leave that one there. Point number 2 is in terms of limits. I was thinking this morning, so I Googled what is the number of galaxies in the universe, you know? And so I got an answer, and it said the most recent number that they've come up with is there are 2,000 billion galaxies. 2,000 billion galaxies. And then they added in the known universe. So just in terms of thinking about limits, you know, in a way it's a limit, but it's 2,000 billion galaxies and maybe counting. That's point number two, just in terms of, you know, limits. It's more of a factoid than anything else. The third point I wanted to make is I recently watched a documentary. I think it came out last year, and the documentary is called Infinite Potential. And I think that the title actually says very much about what the documentary about. It's a documentary about the physicist David Bohm. David Bohm was a brilliant physicist. He worked with Einstein, you know, during that period. And Einstein actually called him his spiritual son. David Bohm also spent a lot of time in conversation with Jiddu Krishnamurti, as well as the Dalai Lama. And what he wanted to do in his lifetime was to connect the science, the cutting edge, you know, the quantum mechanics that, you know, he was so, you know, intimately, you know, familiar with the things that people like Krishnamurti and the Dalai Lama were talking about, the infinite potential. And he came up with various ideas like the implicate order and the explicate order. Anyway, to make a long story short, I just recommend it highly for somebody who, you know, is open to seeing the connections between science and spirit. It's a documentary. If you can't get it on something like Netflix, if you just Google it, you can download it. I think it's like $15 for, you know, you get it forever, the thing. It's about 2 hours, and it's incredibly, you know, interesting. So those are my three little, you know, points I wanted to throw in there. And now the next person will totally ignore what I said and go on to what they want to say.
No, nobody ignores what you said. 1 second, Ron. When you say I'm more spiritual than you think, then I think I'm less spiritual than you think I am. But
Well,
that's another.
Good. That's good. That's being spiritual, you see.
But the second thing is that Bohm, I'm sure Terry can tell us more. Bohm was a very interesting, in inverted commas, person, and had a very strange way of looking at things, different way of looking at things, not always accepted by the scientific community. And I think spirituality, this is my anti-spiritual rant coming up, I think that spirituality is I hope I'm not going to offend anybody here. I think spirituality, I'm not going to offend you, Ron, am I?
You
don't
probably
know.
will offend my ego, but not my spirit.
No, I don't worry about egos. Spirituality, as far as I am concerned, me personally, is a cop-out, because you can do anything. You can say anything.
As far as I'm concerned, to me is a cop-out, but
that's all right.
So be it.
No, fair enough. I don't want to discuss spirituality because it's a very personal thing, and this is fine. I'm just saying, from my point of view, it's you can say anything with spirituality. You can start off with quantum, you throw quantum into it, and you've got spirituality, and you've got all sorts of stuff. You can talk about anything, and it's completely and utterly limitless, because the spirit is limitless, and it doesn't make any sense. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, me personally, only me.
I can apply the same argument to your point of view.
Yeah, I know. That's fair enough. No, that's okay. I'm just saying that spirituality is not sort of thing that I sort of go for. It's fine if people want to go for it. It's great. It's just not my thing. Okay, so and your second point, if I just mention it, just because something is enormous doesn't mean that it's limited. Just because it's billions upon trillions of something does not mean it's limited. Just because it's big, it's very big, it's enormously big, and so is infinity. And is infinity limited? I would say yes. I will get into it soon. Yes, infinity is limited. It all comes back to itself. There are lots of different infinities. If there are different infinities, they have to be limited. That's how I see it. But Terry, did you want to say anything about Bohm or leave it?
Not, he was a good mathematician. He reinvented the de Broglie wave model, pilot model, and did it in much more precise terms. But I don't know that much about his philosophical views. So
Okay, James, I can't see you, so could you put your video on, please, so I can, because I see you want to ask a question. Ah, James, how are you? Now I know who you are. I have had a few Jameses. How are you, James? Good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been very interesting listening to everybody's points of view. I appreciate Debbie's, a really clear explication of Kant's view on the limits of rationality. But Kant also had, didn't he have this kind of a speculative reason where we can't help but imagine ourselves as souls, or as the world, or the idea of God, because it represents a wholeness, right? So we speculate that we are in a in a whole world, or existence is a whole, which includes infinity, or it includes the unlimited. Because if we were to put limits on that, then it's not speculative, it's not philosophy anymore. And there are anti-philosophers, well-known anti-philosophers who put limits on this kind of speculation, which may be analytic, or limits of language, and that's as far as they go. And so that would be kind of an anti-philosophical approach, wouldn't it? So we don't want, if we want to do philosophy, we don't want to limit ourselves in those various kinds of systematic rational thinking, right? So doesn't that make sense that we may need this kind of speculative reason that goes beyond the limits, and think of ourselves as whole beings, or we live in a whole world, or a whole universe, or whatever number of universes there may be. And so we don't want to limit ourselves in scientism, or in strict analytic kind of philosophical systems, right? Or language and things like that, right?
James, I don't think that analytic philosophy is anti-philosophy. It's anti-metaphysics, because it doesn't think that a logic, etc., can deal with metaphysics. They deal with truth, and it's all set out very, very clearly. But it's not anti. There is a fight, but between them, they don't think the metaphysics is worthwhile talking about, because they can't. But it's an important part of philosophy.
Right, but you can't deny that scientists, there is major scientific figures that denounce philosophy as non-relevant.
Yeah, but they are.
And there are analytic philosophers like
Yeah, but they're idiots, aren't they?
Wittgenstein is not an idiot, and he's saying that there is no philosophy. There's only language, and you don't need philosophy, because it's language is therapeutic, right? And and if you do philosophy, you're sick in the head. You need therapy.
They're not
language therapy.
they're not very
I
good.
don't think Einstein said that.
Einstein didn't say that, did he?
Oh,
No,
I don't think so. Einstein was
Einstein
rather
didn't, no,
certain.
no, not Einstein, Wittgenstein.
Oh, Victor. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Wittgenstein.
yeah. Well, what can I say gently? A scientist who says that is not a very good scientist.
Well, that's Stephen Hawking, right? Stephen Hawking is a pretty good scientist.
True.
Stephen Hawking, by the way, said he couldn't understand Kant.
Thank you.
He confessed in his book, The Theory of Everything. No, hold on, no. In his book, A Brief Theory About Time, that after reading the Critique of the Pure Reason, he couldn't understand it.
Well, let's put the other side of this. If you look back on Einstein and see his most productive period where he did the most paper, where he should have gotten the most Nobel Prizes, guess who he blamed? He blamed Hume. He said Hume was the one who gave him the ideas, who gave him the perspective, who gave him the viewpoint to look at clocks instead of thinking of time as an abstraction. Minkowski later converted Einstein over to a different perspective, and that works well for general relativity. But to say that scientists are not inspired by philosophers, oh my gosh. The whole basis of science is derived out of philosophy in every aspect of it. But I would point to Einstein in particular as an example who gave explicit credit to Hume for inspiring what I consider his most remarkable period. And Minkowski kind of weaned him away from that and got him addicted to abstractions that Hume refused to accept. Hume was much more like Ron here. Hume was going like, it is what you see, and be very, very careful when you start saying things that you can't really attach to something more meaningful. So there are some scientists. Who's the Ron? Who is the one that we both ragged about? Tyson, deGrasse, Neil deGrasse. Oh, yes, and just okay. So people say things, they throw it out there. It's the scientific equivalent of red meat, and anybody who talks about throwing out red meat automatically is essentially espousing a rather evil philosophy in life, which is that, red meat is bloody meat. And that's a terrible thing to say. It's a terrible thing to say that, oh, I want red meat. That just means you want violence. Give me a break. That's terrible language. It's a terrible concept. People throw that out so casually. So red meat for scientists too. And it has the same negative connotation. It just makes people upset and gets them all angry. Science is utterly dependent on philosophy, both in its roots, and I would argue still to this day, even more so than it was before, because mathematicians have gotten us hosed into a corner that doesn't exist. You look at the nature of this whole point about limits. Limits have been taken in places that don't have any correlation to physical reality anymore. This is one of the fundamental problems of the last 50 years of science, is we're in a mathematical fantasy. It's a dream world. It is just, we're talking about religions, it's a Gnostic religion. It's not actually attached anymore to physical reality in many cases. The mathematics is incredibly powerful when it remains attached. And my problem is that so many statements, casual statements you find in a quantum mechanical textbook, are not attached to actual physical testable concepts. Particles being a good example, because you can't create a particle. They are a limit. The proper mathematical abstraction says they're a limit. They're nothing more than a limit. They can never be anything other than a limit. And yet every textbook says particles, as if they exist. And then you get contradictions and infinities and paradoxes because we're practicing religion. We're not actually doing science. So I would even say that philosophers bring us back to reality, whereas, mathematics is fun, but boy, you can create worlds, and those worlds you can create do not necessarily correspond to anything other than just little programs that you're writing in your mind, your head, that don't correspond anymore to what is going on. So off my soapbox.
Yeah, also I would mention that Einstein's favorite philosopher was Spinoza.
And that I was not aware of. I knew he credited Hume, and I think I've seen mentioned that, but I've never looked into that. That's
Right, that's the
interesting.
famous love there. Yeah,
He-
famous
he
love
likes-
there.
He likes Schopenhauer as well, by the way.
Right.
Einstein was read a lot of philosophy, a lot. He couldn't have worked out, he couldn't have had those
Right.
thoughts that he had without an incredible philosophical mind. He just
Right.
couldn't have done it.
Right.
It was amazing what he did, and that's philosophy.
I think
It- it's
Spinoza
so-
gave you the idea of the infinite substance in nature, and that we are part of that infinite substance, and that maybe our minds or our existence has no limit because we are that infinite substance. Become a mode of being, a finite mode of being.
James, there's some issues here that I think it's so deep, and I think science is going to have to confront them at some point, which is just the nature of this whole cognition, human cognition, what we are, with how the universe works. There's more going on to this than we understand, and I think that scares people a little bit. But what that means, I have no idea. I would not personally phrase it in terms of terms like infinite substance, but I would make comments like, anytime you use the word time, you have automatically invoked human cognition, because you cannot measure time without a clock. You can't have a clock without a memory. You can't have you can't touch the past with a ruler. You can only recreate it in your head. So the idea that scientists talk about time and say there's no philosophical or cognitive aspect to it is nonsense. You can't talk about time without invoking a rather sophisticated intelligence of some sort. Now, you might call it just a little machine. You can make little computers that do it these days, but that's a rather remarkable statement. How is it that one of the most fundamental units that scientists takes as a given can't exist unless you have some kind of cognitive mechanism that creates this thing called the past that you cannot access? What does that say about what the past really is? I don't think a lot of people have faced that well enough to understand what the meanings of things like that. And this is, again, why I think philosophy is so important to science these days. We need to be stretched and taken out of some comfort zones.
Definitely.
Can you agree that there are two, ideas of time? One is chronos, and what is ion? And I think the kind of time that you were talking about, Ron, where the present is non-existent, is more in line with what is ionic time, because in the time of chronos, which we are used to clock time, we presume that the present does exist, that somehow the present does exist, and memory doesn't really, the past and the future.
You know,
is
James,
not-
when you say somewhat in a sentence,
Yeah.
that sets up a red flag. Everything is somewhat. That's the fuzziness.
Right.
So
That's your
it's problematic to me,
right.
somewhat.
That reminds me of your subjective certainty.
Subjective certainty, yes.
Yeah.
That's,
I'm certain, but it's subjective.
yeah, exactly. We're all certain. And some are more certain than others.
Right. And some are more subjective than others, right?
No, everybody's subjective. Everybody's subjective. Everybody. Cannot be any other way, as far as I'm concerned. Bill, sorry you've been waiting.
I want to say Debbie's exposition of Kant was really wonderful in terms of the paradigms, logical paradigms of pure reason. My question is, hasn't language been the new pure reason? Isn't that the a priori that we bring to our experience? Isn't that what we look at the world through in terms of making sense of it? And the paradigms that we develop to understand that are certainly the scientific hypotheses that we work to get an understanding of our limits. But I think the point that's been made is that we try to push the limits of the envelope of our understanding, not to go beyond it to find some reality that we can't identify. But the idea that language is our primary, a priori perspective on the world seems to me something we can make clear in this discussion. Anyway, that's my thought.
That's yes, that's problematic regarding language. I'm gonna come to it in a minute, but it's an interesting point. Interesting point. I think who's got we've got Ron and Augustine, and then Ron. Okay, Augustine.
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks again. So I have to join fall in line with the praises for Debbie and her exposition of Kant. Really, really, on my years studying philosophy, I had a lot of exposition of Kant. All of them were in my language in Spanish. None of them had been this clear. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
It's incredible. And that is to say. So I think when I'm thinking about Kant and the pure reason, I think the best critic against it is neuroscience that is proving by experiments that actually our pure reason is completely embedded within our emotions. However, then I wonder if Kant did consider that emotions are part of our pure reason. Such as to say, like, is it my prejudice that I'm thinking when I'm thinking in the pure reason of Kant, I'm thinking in reason without emotions? And probably is, I don't know. But my critique against Kant is the one made by Nietzsche, by Friedrich Nietzsche, who talk about, I think this is in Human, All Too Human, particularly talking about the absolute truth, or rather the need for absolute truth. The need for absolute truth doesn't make absolute truth real. The need for the external world, as Kant put it, doesn't make the external world real. So that is what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ron.
Yeah, I lost most of my trains of thought. So the only train of thought that I still have is your statement about the present or the now not existing. And the question I would ask you is, you say just the past, and I imagine maybe the future. I don't know how your stance on the future, but if you or I are thinking of the past or or imagining a future, aren't we always doing it in the present?
No. No. That was a direct question. That was my direct answer. No, because it's just not here long enough. It's not here even a plank length. It's just not here. It's gone. That if I say now, it's gone. It's the past. It's a memory. It's moving back, and it carries on moving back. I can't see physically how we can possibly talk about a present. We can say that we're in the present era. We can expand it. We're in the present century, but that's not the present moment. That what we're talking about, the present. So when I say that listen, I'm talking to you now, but what I'm saying is already the past. It's already in your memory, if anybody remembers what I said, and it's continually going back, and I guarantee that if we think about this tomorrow, there'll be at least 10 different memories of what happened here. And
but they'll always be in that moment. They'll always be in that moment.
Always will be. There always will be that moment. Did you say?
Yes, when? Granted that language has its limitations, so I don't want to get trapped in a language issue here, but yeah, I agree with you that the now is infinitesimal and that, it's hard to measure, just like 200 billion galaxies is kind of, but nevertheless, maybe that infinitesimal moment is infinite. And the limitation is only because you are trying to box it into some kind of a physical time, space, causation sort of a category. And now we get back to Kant.
But I'm doing the exact opposite. I'm showing you that there is a dissonance within each of us, between limits and limitlessness,
Can you
non-limits.
explain the three
The,
tenses
bra-
in
the
language?
brain, the brain is a limited computer. It's an amazing computer. But
Well,
yes, the brain is limited, but that doesn't mean consciousness is limited.
where is consciousness? Where is consciousness?
Well, that's the hard question of consciousness.
That's
That's
what I'm
another
asking
Zoom
it.
meetup.
That's the point. When you say that something is so small that it's infinite, I don't know what you mean. I don't understand it.
Of
It's
course
either
not. The mind can't, the small cannot grasp the larger. So yes, your brain cannot grasp infinite other than in an allegorical,
I
metaphorical,
agree. That's what
poetical
I
sense.
agree. That's what I'm saying. We can't grasp it, and if we can't grasp it, I don't know where it is.
But why are you so anthropomorphic in thinking that because little you, Ron, little me, Ron, because we can't grasp it, it doesn't exist?
For whom would it exist if nobody can grasp it? For whom?
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant question. That's another Zoom meetup.
Yeah, we've done that one actually. No, but that's the question. When you say we can't grasp it, and that's the point I'm making. We're limited. We can't grasp it. Nobody can grasp it. If nobody can grasp it, where is it?
Again,
Who's it there for?
it depends on how you define we,
No.
I.
No, it doesn't. We all know what we mean. We
Do
humans.
Do we really?
Yes.
All right.
No, look.
We
talking,
can agree to disagree.
No, no, we can definitely agree to disagree, but that it doesn't matter whether we agree or not. The point is that we're speaking the same language, and we are human.
Are we? Wittgenstein said we're not speaking the same language.
Yeah, well,
and then later on he recanted.
Yes,
and he
I know.
said, forget everything I said about language.
Well, that just goes to show. Anyway, Wittgenstein not part of this particular thing.
That's another Zoom meetup.
Yeah, but the point is that since we are human, there must be something that we have in common.
It's being. We're human beings. What we have in common is being.
Yeah,
we're unique. Humans, we're unique. But as being, we are only one.
I don't know what that means.
I know you do, but you
don't. Seriously, I don't. I need to understand. I need to understand what these words mean. All I know is that I know nothing. Okay, but all I know is what I know, and all we humans can know is what we know. We can't know we can't know what we can't know. We cannot.
That's what Descartes said. He said, I don't know anything. I doubt everything, but the one thing I cannot doubt is that I exist.
Okay,
I am.
Fair enough.
That's being.
Yeah, but he knows he exists. He doesn't know the rest of us exists. It's something different.
Do you doubt that you exist?
I don't doubt I exist. I doubt that you exist. What's that got to do with it? I know I exist. You know you exist.
Well, there you go.
But that's it.
You can build your whole philosophical framework on the one truth that you exist, that your being is undoubtedly undeniable.
I have built my whole philosophical viewpoint on that particular point. That is exactly it, that I exist. And that's as far as I can get. And I can't understand what something could mean.
That's why I said earlier that you've got spiritual strains in you.
I would ignore that. I can't.
I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop.
I can't agree with Kant in his point about the thing as it is. It is untestable. It is just a way out of everything that he said. He's a very clever man until he said, it is something out there that I can't test, and you have to believe me. And I don't believe him. Why should I believe him? If I can't test it, why do I have to believe Kant? Just because he's Kant, however you want to pronounce it. Morris.
Just a very, very small question. Why has nobody mentioned turtles? I came onto this Zoom only because of the turtles. And apart from seeing a few at the beginning, nobody talks about turtles. I'm very disappointed, Ron, I must tell you.
You do know about turtles, right? You do know the infinite regression thing?
Yes.
Well, there you have it. Those are the turtles.
I bet I have it.
Yes. Okay. We're all
Yes.
looking, we're
All
all
right, now I've had it. Now I've had it. What do I do with it?
nothing much because we can't find it. Somewhere down there is the last turtle and we can't get it because we're limited. We can't. We all want to get to that bottom turtle. We'll never find it.
But are the turtles limited?
Yes. I suppose so. I don't know, you see.
Oh, it's
I
limited.
only know what we humans are, not what turtles are. I can't think. I can only think about what humans think.
There are a limitless number of turtles, one on top of the other.
Correct. All the way down.
That's right.
Correct. That's what we're looking for.
Exactly.
And why is down regarded as where we should be going with these turtles?
Because it's the opposite to progress. It's regression.
I'm not sure.
I am regretting, not regressing.
Can I just insert a question, Ron?
Yes.
When we're talking about, Ron Rubin was talking about being in the present. How is it that when we have to learn a language, we have to know the past, future, and present?
What's the point of asking that question?
Well, in order to understand, if we live through language,
we don't live
in order to learn a language, you have to learn the present of the language.
Of course.
Now, the language tells us that there is a present.
The language doesn't tell us anything. We are the ones who use language, and we are the ones who fervently believe that we live in the present. It is absolutely essential for us to believe that, whereas we don't. Whereas it is impossible, but we need to believe that, just like people need to believe, and I now duck under the table, they need to believe they have free will. They need to believe it.
But perhaps it's true.
Perhaps what's true? That we have free will? Perhaps it's true that there are fairies at the bottom of my garden. Perhaps it's true. I don't know. James.
So Ron, you're talking about we can never capture the present, doesn't exist, and so we're constantly in this state of becoming, right? We're in time. The time is a river that constantly flows, and we can never step into it twice. So if that's the case, can I ask you, in your opinion, where do you find being then if it's just constantly this kind of constant change and we can never capture the moment?
I suppose being is the past. That's all I can say. The past is memory.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
It cannot be anything else but memory. That's why the past is changing. Everybody's got a different past. I don't think there is the past. The past can only be memory. It can't be anything else, can it?
So it's each person's state of illusion, then, right? Of what being is.
No, I wouldn't call it illusion. I would call them I would call them false memories.
False memory. Okay.
no, but it's not an illusion.
So what is false then?
Well, because nobody knows, because there is no real past.
Okay.
So everybody has a different past. We all remember different things. And there is no the past that we can look at. I mean, historians will also tell us there is no the past. It depends who's looking at it, who talked about it, who wrote about it, and why. So where is the past?
Right.
That's how I see it.
Right. But so it's all a shared state of being that if people share the same memory or history, then we have this false false state of being.
There's I admit that we are treading on dangerous ground when we talk about false.
Are you saying that today is the 6th of June, the landing at Normandy in 1944? Are you saying we have a false memory?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that that if you focus in and out, it depends where your memories are. That the memory of that big thing, I guarantee that everybody who was in that, every single person thought of it and remembers it differently. Every single one who landed on those beaches. I
But we can have
guarantee
a
it.
general memory, a
Oh yeah,
general
general,
memory.
yes. As I'm talking about focusing in and focusing out.
Yes, we can have a macro memory.
Okay, if you want, but there again, the 6th of June was not the 6th of June on the other side of the world. You can focus in, you can focus out, and you can say these general things happened, but in order to say that something happened, you have to focus in, and nobody will focus in on the same thing. Everybody remembers the war differently. Nobody. I don't want to go into this. I've nearly put my foot in it, but we got to be very, very careful about the things we remember and how we talk about the things I remember, because when I watch this, when I watch this tomorrow, this recording, there'll be things that I will say, oh, that's strange, I don't remember that. And if I didn't see it, somebody would tell me that happened. I said, no, it didn't. And I look at it and I say, oh, I don't remember that. If I hadn't seen that, I would never remembered it. It would have never have been in my past, never. And once you forget something, your past is gone. If somebody's senile, their past is gone. I don't know what their being is, James. It's an interesting question, but it's a very interesting question. If somebody's memory is wiped out, in what sense are they being? What is there that links them to the world?
Can I just interject here?
Yeah.
I mentioned on a previous Zoom some time ago a book by Umberto Eco,
Yes.
Italian author. In the central character has had some massive stroke, and he wakes up in hospital with no memory at all, and he realizes that he is not a person, and in order to become a person again, he has to rediscover his memories. Without memories, we are nothing.
And if I could just add to that briefly, we all believe that we were born, and yet I can guarantee you that no one has a memory of being born. So how do we know we were ever born?
Ask
Hearsay.
your mother.
Hearsay, yes,
Exactly.
hearsay.
Ask the mother.
Right, exactly.
Birth certificate.
But you don't have, no one has direct experience of being born.
That's
So
true.
maybe we were never born. Maybe
Yeah,
it's just an illusion.
Maybe.
I would like to remember the experience of being born.
I didn't catch the first part. Frank?
If I can also jump in as well, I would like to say that it is true that memory is linked to our identity. And for example, people with Alzheimer, they lose their memory, but they also lose their identity at the same time. So yeah, and then according to neuroscience, it is true. Our memories are things that we remember, but that are in theory in our past. However, they are remembered from who we are now. So when I remember my childhood, I don't remember as it were. I remember as I am now. And so that makes the memory different, because I'm a different person now that I have grown a bit.
Well, then you're giving credence to the now.
Right.
This made my perspective.
Yeah, that means that your self-identity is constantly changing, because you are, remembering yourself, not how you were, but how you, based on how you are now.
Yeah, but that's also moving back.
Right,
You
which
can't-
is constantly
can't-
also changing. So
you can't win.
right.
You
So
can't
there's,
win.
so we have no personality, right?
Oh yes, we do. We all got great personalities here.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
but we are,
greatest the greatest personalities meet here the first Sunday of the month.
Right.
That is a known fact.
But not any fixed personality, that is.
No fix. No, it can't be. How can it be fixed when everything's moving? Alan, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Basically, I agree with most of what has been talked about, but I have an issue with the subjectiveness of it. I think that there are two sides here that are one side of which has not been described very explicitly. About 20 years ago, I discovered extracellular matrix, and I was thinking about up to that point, I thought that a cell was more or less a function of the nucleus and the DNA in the nucleus. And I really didn't realize that cells interact with other cells via their glycocalyx, their glycosaminoglycans, all that stuff, that fuzziness that comprises the border of the cell. The point I'm making is that it isn't only what we are, or what we try to do and the way that we subjectively look at the world that is important. What's important is also what we lay down, the house that we live in, the world that we live in, the language that we occupy, that interaction between our subjective self and what we have laid down or what has been laid down for us, before us.
So, okay, so what we lay down is objective, objectively.
Well, it's this, our subjective self is one thing, but we are interacting with a history. We're interacting with a structure, within a structure. I know that this has been implicitly said, but it not so explicitly.
Yes, but the fact that we react with things, the things we're reacting with are also moving. We are not in any steady state. We are not. We're the subject of limits. There's a shifting limit all the time, and if a limit shifts, it's not a limit. A limit has to be. A limit is just that, fixed. And I'm asking, is there such a thing as anything that's fixed? Anything? Because
well, on that score, Ron, I agree with you. I don't think there is either. You know, we're on the same page there. But in the discussion, I don't think that we have explicitly stated what it is that we are reacting on, what the playing field that stabilizes us, I would say.
That's very interesting. And here I come to a very awkward point and admission that I cannot ever find the stability in order to say this is it, because I don't think there is an it, and I don't think there is an is. It casts me in a very difficult position, because people want to hear it at the end of the day. This is the story, and I'm saying there is no story. There's a story that we tell ourselves and each other, and that story moves. So that when people are looking for, say, a theory of everything, this is a big thing, right? And I say that it's impossible. How can there be a theory of everything? At what point will you get to when you say, I know it all, I can fix it, I can put it all together? Where does it leave us as human beings when there's nowhere else to move to, because we've got a theory of everything. There's nothing else to work out. The whole business about a theory of everything is to me extremely suspect. It means that somewhere out there is an everything, and I can't see how that's possible.
But I think the point is not that there is ultimately a theory of everything or that you figured it out totally. The point is that you figured it out on a short enough time scale to make sentences and to make paragraphs and to make books.
You mean approximately and temporarily?
Yes.
Well, that's extremely problematic, because it's not everything. It's a temporary everything, which is not an everything.
But does philosophy need to believe that we need to entertain the possibility of a theory of everything?
Not my philosophy, no.
So philosophy,
that's why people often don't like what I'm saying, because they want
so
to hear it. They want to hear the truth. I can't tell you the truth.
Right. So you're saying that philosophy has a limit, right?
No.
We should limit philosophy to what we can know.
No, I don't think there are such things as limits.
Okay.
I think that even cyclic things that Frank mentioned, they are limited. After all, you have a wheel that goes round and round,
right.
But it moves the whole caboodle forward. So you've got the cyclic and you've got the linear, and somewhere along the line, everybody wants to think, look, there's a limit, and I feel comfortable because there it is. I'm safe. This is it. And I can't. My problem is that I can't, in my philosophy, point to it. I can't do it. Once I've done that, my philosophy collapses. And it's very problematic. I'm not saying it's not problematic.
Right. So philosophy is driven by this the motivation for the limit or for the limitless.
Good question. I've got no idea. I would think that's a dichotomy. That's where we're the internal fights. All of us have got things that go against other things inside ourselves. Everybody. Right. Yeah. And we're trying to get a balance, and I don't think we ever do. And the point is that we're all looking for the balance. We're all looking for harmony. And I think we're driving ourselves crazy because we're looking for something that might not exist. If we could sort of relax and say, look, there is no harmony, maybe that would be healthier. I don't know. I know that everybody nowadays is looking for wholeness, for harmony. And I don't know.
A semblance of harmony.
Pardon?
A semblance of harmony.
Yeah, because we all feel that it's there. It has to be there. We've got to look for it. We've got to look for the limits. So yeah, Frank, sorry. Yes.
What I'm saying is, what you're saying really is the difference between our world today and the world of 200 years ago. 200 years ago, the encyclopedists in France decided to put together enormous amount of volumes of the encyclopedia, and their aim was to put together all the knowledge known in the known world up to their time. In other words, they considered that there was a limit to knowledge, and they set to work. They put together enormous amounts of volumes of which was later banned, by the way. And they put together this incredible set of encyclopedias, which they claimed was all the known knowledge in the Western world up to that time. Several times they've claimed that it's impossible to do, but then other philosophers came along in the 18th century and said, we've done it. This is all the knowledge there is. And what I'm saying is, they put limits on it. Well, this could be the difference between us today and the world of then.
But Frank, they were wrong, weren't they?
Well, they might have had all the knowledge they had till then. We don't know. We weren't there.
But 5 minutes later, we realised they were wrong because there's more knowledge that's come in. They were wrong. They were stupid. It's a stupid thing to do.
Till their time, but the idea was to add to it all the time.
Yeah, because they didn't come to these Zoom meetings. That's why they would never have done it. Terry, I can't hear you.
The most infamous example of what you were just talking about was around 1900, where scientists thought they had the entirety of physics and physical knowledge wrapped up in a neat little package, tying bow. And some annoying person came up with some little problems in something called quantum mechanics, some little annoying problems called relativity. And of course, the whole thing just absolutely exploded into nonsense. So we put these limits, but the interesting thing is our ability to convince ourselves that little dangling thread doesn't really matter. Yeah, we can just ignore that. That's not a problem. And that, of course, is the one that winds up blowing up the entire package in the end, the little fuse that someone finally lit. So, by the way, Alan, I liked your comment about extracellular communication mechanisms. I assume you're in cellular biology of some sort?
Oh, are you talking about,
Yes.
are you
Alan,
asking me? Oh, no, this is just something that,
that you were reading about, or?
well, I do work in biology, but I don't really work in extracellular matrix. But it is a fascination of mine in that when I was abroad, my wife was having a lot of problems with a pregnancy. I spent a lot of time in medical school, and I discovered extracellular matrix and all these fascinating things about integrins and, you know, glycosaminoglycans, etc. And
they have a language.
Yeah, it changed my life, believe me.
One reason I mentioned, I did want to point out that in terms of boundaries, you've heard about how it's hard to define human intelligence sometimes. And this is an interesting thing because some chimpanzees, frankly, are smarter in terms of solving problems than some human beings. It just is. There's some very, very clever primates who can solve problems, or you don't have to go to primates. I mean, we all know if you've got a smart dog, you understand a smart dog can be better at solving something sometimes than people, you know. So what is human intelligence? And one of the things that I think is fascinating is part of it is you have to get the boundaries, let loose the boundaries, and realize that what really makes human intelligence unique is the networking of it. And until you recognize the networking, the old idea that we stand on each other's shoulders, you're not going to understand what human intelligence is. Because any human in isolation with no training, no connections, you will find is not that terribly different from an extremely clever chimpanzee or some other animal or a porpoise. So when we network, when we stop this thing about saying, here's the arbitrary boundary, that's it, all my intelligence is in my head, suddenly the whole thing starts making more sense about why we are so unique and able to do things that no one else can. So I like to your point about, you know, that goes on at more levels than just the cells. We make the artificial boundaries. That has been our tradition the last half century.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
more and more
something
computers and networking says no, that's not the way it works.
I read something recent yesterday that struck me and well along that line. Was talking about science and how science develops, and it's just a simple fact that science develops on history of science. You know, there are so many ways that you go from A to B to C, and one of them is history.
By the way, Ron, I had a question for you. Aren't limits part of how you create approximations?
Yes.
I mean, you can't create approximation unless you first define a limit, can you? Because an approximation has to be relative to something.
Approximation has to be relative to something. That is true. Although I don't like the word true. But
Absolutely true.
Yes. But on the other hand, if approximation is approximate to everything else, then are we still not in approximation? If there's nothing that's steady, nothing, right? Then something else can be approximate to that something that's not steady, right? So we got a lot of approximation, a lot of fuzziness, And yes, I suppose we have to compare one to another, but I don't. You're alluding to the fact that somewhere there must be something that's not approximate.
Well, it's almost a matter of semantics. It's just the very word approximation to me instantly implies an approximation of something. In other words, I want to find the approximate distance. I've just said that there's a distance. I want to find the approximate temperature. That implies there's a temperature. So what I find fascinating, and a temperature is a limit. It is a specification of some sort. A distance is a limit. It's a way of saying it. So I think there's a fascinating intertwining of the limits, nominal limits, not absolute limits, and the idea of approximation. The limits allow us to say things. But then the trouble is, if you lock them down too tightly, then you can't say anything at all except that. So there's an interesting interplay of some sort.
Well,
I mean, your thoughts?
Yeah, let's say that Maurice, I can't hear a word you're saying.
Approximation refers to something which is proximate to a certain point.
Right.
Is it a limit, or is it just a point, and that anything else is proximate to it?
If we think of what I talked about, focusing in and focusing out, and each one of those, it's all approximate. You focus out and you see this great huge thing, then you focus in. You can focus in more and more and more and more. Now, you're alluding to the fact that if we focus in closely enough, we'll get to the non-approximate, to the thing. And
I'm not saying that. No.
Weren't you saying that something approximate, there has to be something that's not approximate?
I'm saying that to some degree, limits are expressions of concepts, and that the concepts don't necessarily correspond to some kind of underlying absolute at all. I'm not trying to get into that. I'm not saying it does or it doesn't. I didn't even think of it that way. I'm simply saying that I made a comment earlier in the comments that to define a limit is to also define something beyond that limit. So it's a language issue. It's a linguistic issue, that the very act of defining limit also enables us. Someone else said that. I don't remember who it was, if they're still here, but that enables us to try to go beyond that limit. And I think that's a very good observation, because if you look at a lot of human history, they say, well, we can't do that. And the very act of doing that just activates some people and say, are you sure? Are you absolutely sure you cannot do that? And then they try to go beyond it. And sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail. But the whole thing about quantum mechanics and relativity was one of those things where they said, here's the limit, it's all defined, wrapped up, neat package. Someone said, I don't think so. And they broke beyond it. And boy, that one really broke out. So I think there's an interesting interplay of limits. It's a challenge to us.
One sec, Frank, I'm coming to you in a second. Just let me give an example of temperature. I think you mentioned temperature.
Yeah.
There's a limit. There's
absolute zero.
Minus 272 degrees, right? Something like that. That's a limit, but it's a false limit.
Yes.
Because you can't get to it. The molecules stop. What you're getting to does not exist as anything that you can talk about. So to use that and say that is the limit, and from there everything is approximate, that's almost false, because you just can't get to what we say is a limit. It stops. Molecules stop. It's not. It's like, right?
Actually, they don't. That's the problem. Is molecule. The reason absolute zero doesn't exist is because molecules don't stop. The quantum uncertainty says they just keep on moving. So liquid helium stays liquid helium no matter how cool you make it, because the quantum uncertainty says, I'm not quite sure if I'm a liquid or a solid. I'll just stay a liquid. It's the only substance that does that, but it's kind of unsure about itself. It's approximate. It's sort of says, I'm approximately should be solid, but I'm not quite sure, so I'll just wing it. And so, but you're right about the absolute. In fact, it's an infinitely distant limit. to get to absolute zero. They now talk in an exponential scale and say, well, we got 1/billionth of a degree away from absolute zero, or 1/trillionth of a degree from absolute. I don't know how far they've got.
But still not there.
But you can't get. But it's considered infinitely far away. Now the scale they use now says absolute zero is as far away as the stars. You can't get there.
Yeah.
All we do is get closer to it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, Frank, yes.
Yeah, I think talking about limits, we should really look at sport. I mean, I recall in 1953, there was a limit to the 4-minute mile. And it went on for years and years. And people thought it wasn't humanly possible to break the 4-minute mile. And there came Roger Bannister and Chris Chataway and a third guy, and they broke the 4-minute mile, which goes to show that you need the limit in order to go beyond the limit, to give you the challenge, the human challenge, to look beyond the limit. Another aspect of it is, if there's no limit, then it leads to chaos, doesn't it? Isn't that connected to chaos theory? Question.
Yeah, but chaos and chaos theory is not the same thing. Chaos theory is, I mean, there's a rhyme and reason. I mean, if you look back, you can see why something happened.
But there's no limit to it, right?
I'm not so sure about. No limit. There has to have been a limit once you get to it, if you see what I mean. Once the tornado has happened, you can go all the way back and find that butterfly that flapped its wings in China. But you can't do it forward. You can only do it backward, which backs up what I was talking about time. You can't look forward, you can only look backward.
So that's the turtle.
That's the turtle.
In regression.
The what?
The turtle in regression.
Yeah,
the regressive turtle.
Yeah, but you can't get to it, because once you get to the butterfly, you've got to go somewhere before that. You'll never get to it. Ron, do you have your blue hand up?
For a long time.
Sorry, Ron. Go for it.
So three hopefully quick points again. One, just what Alan spoke about cells. It kind of reminded me of a similarity to what in physics they're now discovering about entanglement and networks and how everything is connected to everything else. So I just put that in as a factoid. That's number one. Number two, and this is just a thought, you could take it or leave it, but for anything to be moving, there has to be a background, a still background. Otherwise, it's irrelevant to talk about something moving. So there needs to be an unmoving background, which leads me to the third and final point that somebody had raised about what happened to the turtles and why we're not talking about the turtles. And so I'm going to offer you two possible categories of human beings, and I want to ask you if you would agree with me or not. One category of human beings says it's turtles all the way down, and all I'm interested in is finding out how each turtle lives and breathes and operates, what its connection is to the turtle below it, and that's it. That's all I'm interested in. I'm interested in the turtles. Then there's another category of human beings, much, much smaller, which says, yes, I'm also interested in the turtles and how they all work, but I'm also interested in finding out if there is a last turtle at the bottom or the top. I don't know, top bottom is just for convenience of allegory and metaphors. But when I get to that last turtle, is that last turtle standing on the ground of being, which we might call, in philosophy, we might call it the absolute, or is there no such thing as a ground of being or an absolute? And I think, most of us will fall into one of those two categories. The second category, most people say, I'm not interested in whether or not there's a ground of being. I want to figure out all the turtles. And then there's the few of us you know, the real wackos like myself who believe that all the turtles are standing on an absolute ground of being, and I won't be satisfied until I can answer whether or not that's true or not. Would you agree at least that those are two categories, you know, that most of us fall into one or the other of those?
I would love to agree with you, Ron, but I can't, because
You can't, now you can't.
can't
Emmanuel?
or can't. Okay, can't, is that all right?
Kant himself had problems with this question I'm raising, whether or not there was an ultimate ground of being.
Because the whole point of turtles all the way down is that they're all the way down. That's it.
That's it. In other words, so if you follow the Big Bang, right, the latest cosmological theory, there was a Big Bang. So they go back to the millionth of a billionth of a second and then the Big Bang. But does science have an answer to what might have possibly been that exploded into the Big Bang?
Well, I can't resist on this one. There's a small number of physicists who have gotten interested lately into the dual universe, the paired universe concept. I thought I invented it in 2007. I found out that Sean Carroll invented it in 2004. But the dual universe says there's another universe going backwards in time. We're going forward in time. And you know what the absolute base is in the dual universe theory? Nothing. It all goes back to nothing. That the Big Bang is actually the two universes, like a virtual pair, pop apart. And it's a funny little thing that Ron calls time stabilizes them and prevents them from coming back together. And they start moving apart. They want to get back together to nothing, but they can't. So I just find that as a particularly amusing idea that the base, if there was one in the dual universe concept, and again, this is, it's been taken up lately by some other areas, but it turns out to be nothing. The absence goes back to where you go through it, which makes a curious kind of an idea for what is the base of the turtles. You got two turtles going out in two directions, but you get back to it and they come out with zero. They go back to null.
Since you mentioned nothing, I cannot resist. Absolutely cannot resist to dive into that, and that is nothing. There's no such thing as nothing if there's nobody around. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I understand if you're saying that there was a nothingness, i.e., and that of something, but you're saying nothing. And if you're talking about nothing, it would have to be that there was nobody, nothing around for that particular thing to have happened. For whom did that happen?
And I leave that to Ron for you to figure out. I'm looking for your assistance on how to philosophically ground the dual universe, virtual universe pair concept. So we eagerly await your expertise.
I did. But I've already done it. I've said that for scientists to talk about something that happened like that is no different from what religion says. It all came from nothing, that it was created somehow magically. God did it, or here we've got some scientific something that happened. Nothing can happen from nothing. If there was nothing, nothing can happen from it, because there's nothing there for it to happen from.
Yes, and indeed, Big Bang theories, take your choice. Any theory that proposes an origin in the universe, not just the dual universe I just talked about, but Big Bang, multiverse, which I'm not a multiverse fan. I'm a unitary universe person. I'm not a multiverse person. Oh boy, am I not. It's, by the way, somebody said about chaos, there's no limit to chaos. There is a limit to chaos. It's called the ultraviolet catastrophe. Quantization, quantum theory takes care of it. Says you can't do that. After a certain point, it just gets fuzzy. It just stops. It blurs. So you can't get unlimited chaos. That was the ultraviolet catastrophe. So, and I'm drifting at this point, but I was curious to hear what Maurice had to say. He was really shaking his hand there.
Maurice, what was the problem?
Maurice, I think you're on mute.
I'm pleased at least that the tortoises, the turtles have had a mention here. And the very idea of turtles going in two directions with universes on their backs, I found fascinating. I was picturing it in my, but is that not the two turtles as you described them? Is that not how turtles make love?
Well, what you described is pretty much literally it. Time is the turtles. The turtles grow and they reproduce.
Very slowly.
And out they go. And the existence of time is what causes the turtles to propagate, and off they go. And once they get going, it's hard for them to stop. But it's the reason we exist. So you've heard about virtual particle pairs in physics. Those are little turtle pairs that just don't make it. They just go boing, boing, back together. And yet that's a definable physics effect. It's actually fundamental to measuring all sorts of things. You have to take that into account. So these universes are just the same thing at a bigger scale, but this weird idea of time kind of mixes it up. But I actually agree with what Ron is saying. There's something weirder going on in all this, because Ron keeps going back to the thing. He says, who's watching this? Where's this coming from? Where's it going on? And I'm not disagreeing with him at all that there's still a strange thing about saying how, I see things from my perspective. I can say I'll leave it to Ron to figure out what's going on with issues like that. But in terms of the physics and the rules and how it does it, the dual universe thing does give an answer to the turtles. You get two rows of turtles, and back in the day, they reproduce. Boy, they got going.
Ron, I think that Terry has got it all sewn up. I must say, it all sounds very, very reasonable to me. I'm prepared to accept that. And in fact, when you say who can see it, who's going to see these, don't turtles count? Can't they see it? If the whole thing is only seen by a turtle, or even a pair of, isn't that enough?
Can we think about that?
In terms of the actual physical theory, it would say exactly that, by the way. The turtles self-observe. The idea that now, and this is, I don't want to get in this whole whatever, I think there's a term for it, Ron, I forget what it is. But the idea is that at least they get all tangled up in a fashion that they can't untangle. And once they do that, they go off at escape velocity and away they go. So now I think at the bottom, though, I asked my turtle over here and he said that this is what's at the bottom. So the wisdom of the owl. And so that's the final. I
want to say something about language before we go off, because everybody's been mentioning language and that we're imprisoned by language, and language tells us this, and language doesn't tell us anything. We use language in order to convince each other of certain things, but the problem is that, don't you find it's impossible to convince people of things? I mean, you can argue with people and you think you've got the greatest argument in the world, and you say it, and the person comes back to you and you realize, I haven't got through. I don't understand. We're speaking the same language. How can he not understand the brilliance of my logic? How can he not understand? And he thinks the same about you. So it's almost pointless. I know that sometimes I tear my hair out because I can't get through. So the feeling is that language has limitations. And I say, no, it doesn't. It's the opposite. It's because it is too open. It is approximate. Language is approximate. That's why it doesn't work, not because it's limited. If it were limited, it would be easy. We could go to the dictionary. We could look at it. Look, I'm saying these words, and that's what they mean. But it doesn't work, because a dictionary we don't understand either, because the dictionary has to be interpreted as well. It's approximate. So, for example, we don't read, if we read a book a second time, it's never the same. They're the same words, and we read it differently. It's the same as seeing seeing a film. We're coming back to limited things, and so I can mention now that Bill is still with us, so I can mention lawyers. No, I'm not saying anything against lawyers, Bill. No jokes. Okay, it's okay. No jokes about lawyers. I'm just stating that when I mentioned this before, when a contract is made, lawyers sit and they think of every single word, and they think about it and they go on and on. It is perfect. And out comes this perfect document until somebody contests it and says, wait a minute, that doesn't mean that. And then they're arguing about something they already decided upon. The whole thing is absolutely without limit. And here you've got language that's been thought about. So it goes to court, and they argue it out, and they get to the judge, and the judge decides. And what does he decide? He decides what he thinks the language said. But it's all approximate, and the judge is no more superior regarding language than the others. All three lots think about this differently. The language is completely approximate, and that's my point. What do you say to that, Bill? Am I wrong?
Well, the Kantian paradigms, however, have the same limitation, no? That's to say, I disagree that that's the cause. I disagree that that's the disjunction. I disagree. I can argue with that with you. A didn't cause B. A is not an alternative to B.
Yeah.
And so I can say our usage determines the meaning in Wittgenstein's terms, and we can agree about the meaning, but the language is not precise, and neither are the categories and paradigms of logic.
Yes.
I don't know. That's the point.
Yes. So that's part of. I want to mention one more thing because I found that interesting. It's about religion. So we talked about this eternal conflict of limits versus the unlimited, and there's some very interesting stuff here. For the difference between Jesus and the Jewish God, it suddenly occurred to me. Jesus is a combination of the unlimited, the non-human. Correct me if I'm wrong. The non-human God, and the limited human who died. There's this within that one figure. There's the two, the limited and the unlimited. So Jesus' struggle with temptation, his rejection of hypocritical dogma, and his willing self-sacrifice parallels every Christian, or perhaps every person's own struggle, the struggle between the limited and the limitlessness, and which is different, by the way, as far as I understand it, from the Jewish God, which is more problematic, because the Jewish God is an unlimited being. There is nothing limited about that one God. And he does things which are in conflict with what believers believe should be right. He will do terrible things, terrible meaning from the point of view of people on earth, but he is unlimited and therefore has to be accepted as he is. So it's rules and punishment in this limited world. Does anybody see anything that I saw in that? I found that interesting, but I do find all sorts of stuff. And talking about Morris's usual point in religion, that all religions and all faiths and all sects and all cults state that death is not the end. It's the one way that they get everybody. You're not going to die, and if you die, it's going to be all right. And if it's not all right, then it's your fault here. But it's not going to end. There's no cult that does not tell us that. Even Christian Science states that humans can live forever if they do certain things. They don't necessarily die. And that is the one hope that we're all believers are given. You don't need to die if you do X, Y, Z. That was met with incredible silence. In that case, I've got to do one more thing for Terry. I always talk about something to do with artificial intelligence because I know very little about it, but it fascinates me. Humans are limited because they care, right? Robots don't care, so they're potentially unlimited. So this is the opposite conclusion. The notion that robots won't take over the world is because they don't care to. So there's no danger from robots because they don't particularly care. Why would they want to take over the world? Only humans want to take over the world. Robots won't. We are safe. Do you agree, Terry, that we're safe?
From a general intelligence robot, one of the issues you have for a general intelligence, one with true human-like intelligence, is that if you don't give it a goal, it won't do anything. It's despite all the kind of propaganda about reasonableness and logicalness and all that, nobody does anything unless they have a goal, and that goal is usually stated as an emotional goal. So yeah, there's a real problem with that. The danger is that you don't need a true artificial general intelligence. I put a little robotic mechanism in a plane, send off a bomb, and the bomb goes boom. That doesn't take much intelligence to do that. That's the danger with robotics, is not the ones that are actually smart enough to think about things, but the fact that you can amplify danger to unbelievable levels using artificial intelligences. So they're actually quite stupid because they don't care, but they take commands. So the danger is the robots that take commands very, very readily, not the ones who decide what they want to do. So I'm both agreeing and disagreeing. I agree that I think there's a much more tricky issue about why would a robot want to take over? It's not obvious that they would necessarily would. On the other hand, man, you can do a lot of damage with powerful, intelligent robots that do exactly what you tell them to do. And we're undergoing it right now on the internet, because that is a large part of what's happening and what's tearing apart American society right now. Is a concerted, well-designed, well thought out cyber attack on the very psychology of how people work. And it's scary as all get out, and it is not stopped. And it's not hard to figure out who's doing a lot of it. And they did a good job of it. So yes, limited AIs can be incredibly dangerous, and we're undergoing it.
Okay, so I'm going to finish off with something really light, just to tell you that crazy ideas are limitless. And I'm going to give you something that I read a few days ago. You might know this, but if you don't, you won't believe it. Kellogg's has a new cereal out, which I'm sure you're anxious to sample. Okay, they got little goblets of compacted corn, salt, and sugar, dyed in rainbow colors, and they come in a box that encourages children to choose their own pronouns and better understand LGBTQ and all that stuff issues. Yes, it's the first breakfast cereal to make you throw up before you've even eaten it. This is all true. A spokesman for the company said, I quote, "No matter who you are, who you love, or what pronouns you use, you are too awesome to fit into a box." And this comes from Kellogg's press release. On each box, consumers will be able to obtain a Tear Out Together band to share and wear their pronouns, which includes representation for non-binary and transgender individuals. This is a cereal in the morning, okay? But by the way, just to remind you that John Harvey Kellogg invented the cornflake in the late 19th century because he believed it was a kind of food that might deter people from masturbating, which he considered a grave and debilitating sin. Clearly then, the current board did not eat nearly enough of the stuff. I just found that, and I found it so funny. I just to those people lucky enough to stay, I thought you'd like to know about crazy ideas that are completely and utterly limitless. So I do thank you for coming this evening, and I look forward to seeing you next time. And thanks a lot, and be well, everybody. Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Ron.
Bye.